Hello and welcome to the Alpha, Demo, and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined by Sarah Mitchell, our Director of Customer Success. Today, Sarah is going to be reviewing a CORS policy, cross-origin something. You'll know it better than I do by the end of the session. So, but we're also here, of course, to answer your questions. You could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Looks like you're already presenter. So away we go.
I am. You can hear me all right?
I can. Coming through loud and clear.
Perfect. Yes. So yeah, we are going to talk about CORS today, but just a little bit of housekeeping before that. Just to let you guys know, upcoming webinars next week, UX Component Watch Events with Dion. That should be fun to come learn about. If you've ever wanted to add an event that occurs when somebody presses a button or clicks the right mouse button anywhere in your app, you will be interested in these watch events. So definitely want to attend that. And then on the 25th, we're going to talk about panels, layouts, and navigation, how you do it, and talk about how to build in some flow and layout into your apps, both web and mobile. And on June 1st, we're going to actually talk about deploying your app to production using Alpha Cloud. So we've done a lot about getting set up to do testing. Once you've gotten to the point where you're ready to put something up there for people to look at. We talked about live test, but we haven't done one yet on going to production. So we're going to talk about that on June 1st. And then on June 8th, we're going to talk about mobile deployment with Alpha Launch. If you were here last week, somebody asked about Alpha Launch, and we thought that we did a presentation on it a few months ago. We did a presentation on it over a year ago, so I feel like it's about time that we talk about that again. And not much has changed with Alpha Launch, so what we're actually going to dig into in that one is just dig a little bit deeper what you can do with it, and then take a look at some examples, talk about how it works, under the hood, and how you can better utilize that within your corporation, or even just as a development tool for you while you're building your apps. And then as a reminder, Devcon is coming up. We would love for you to register. If you are registered, thank you. If you are interested in perhaps doing a presentation, we do have some slots available for our customers. We love to see what you have built, and we love it when you share it with others. And I'm sure other people love to see what other people have been doing with Alpha Anywhere or Alpha Transform. Both products we create, and we'd love to see demos on both. And if you think you would be interested in sharing, contact us. We would love to hear from you. So today, we're talking about CORS, and CORS stands for Cross-Origin Resource Sharing. And if you have ever tried to make a call into a web service that you hadn't set up properly or configured a web service, it just didn't work, or even if you're developing mobile applications and try to make a request to the application server, you may have seen this error message, and this error message simply says that access to a site, and this one it's localhost 5000 from the origin localhost 8080 has been blocked by CORS policy, which means that that site that made the request doesn't have permission to read anything from localhost 5000. And to really understand what's going on here, and to give you guys some more information, so when you run into these things, when you're developing your web applications or mobile applications, to make you think about why this is happening. I just wanted to cover about CORS, and we're also going to talk about same origin policy, the history about where all this stuff came from. And then also we're going to do a live demo today that actually is related to all of this. So before we can talk about configuring CORS and understanding CORS, you need to understand what the same origin policy is. And the same origin policy is a security rule that is imposed by web browsers. And what it does is it controls access of data between web applications. So what it really does is it prevents somebody running malicious code on a website, maybe a travel website or a weather website or a social media site, from being able to just make a request to your bank website that you might be logged into at the same time, and prevent them from being able to just log in and access information. And really what this does is it just prevents reading data. It doesn't prevent sending data. And access is based on origins. If your origins don't match, access is denied. You You can't read any data from that site. And an origin is this thing here on the screen. It's a protocol, it's a domain, and it's a port. All three of these things need to match exactly, or the request won't work. So protocol is going to be your HTTPS or HTTP. Your domain is that entire middle bit, www.example.com. If that is not exactly the same, you're going to get same site. That same origin policy is going to not let you access. Same on port. Port has to be identical. Now, if you're browsing the web, you may notice that ports aren't always included in the URL, and that's because HTTP defaults to port 80 and HTTPS defaults to port 443. So it doesn't need to be included, but it does need to match. So to handle that same site or same origin policy, we go back a screen here. If you look at the domain www.example.com, that domain is different from let's say users.example.com or store.example.com. Those are three different domains. So while the same origin policy is designed to help prevent people from being able to get at your banking data when you're logged in, it also can create a problem if you've got a site that has you've got multiple domains and you want to share resources across those domains. It may be all under, you may have registered all that that domain and you own it, but you are going to get bit by this, and that's where CORS comes into play. And it is a way to specify what sites, what origins, what web applications are allowed to access, what resources they can get a hold of through the use of HTTP headers. And so if you implement a CORS policy, it will let a site like myapp.com make a call to myservice.com. It will validate that you have access, you have permission to access that and send the information back. And that will let this whole interaction happen as opposed to being blocked by the same origin policy. So to configure CORS, and if I'm going too quickly, let me know, because this is actually very, very simple. CORS is just configured using HTTP headers. And by and large, most of you probably will never, ever run into this. The only places where you're going to run into this is if you are building a web service, which is our demo today, or if you're configuring your Amazon S3 buckets and you don't really understand what is meant by allow-origin, allow methods. This is the underlying thing that you're implementing on those bucket configurations. You're specifying what gets sent back in a request on the header to the browser to say whether or not the site that has submitted that request can access it or isn't allowed to access. So these are three headers that are used to configure it. I believe there may be another one. This is not going to be an exhaustive list. We're not going to go through every single thing you can do with it. But we are going to talk about what you can do with these headers, what the configurations mean, and then take a look at some mistakes people have made, some of them famous, that caused problems through misconfigured CORS and accidentally gave access to way more than they intended. So the first one, this access control allow origin. This is the one that defines which origins are allowed to access a resource. And there's only three allowed ways to specify it. You can give it a star, which means everyone, it's public. You can give it an origin, and that origin would be something like https://www.example.com. You can only give it one. You can't specify multiple origins. You can only specify one. And then there's a third one called null, which was intended for use with sandbox development. But as you'll discover later in this presentation, there are ways that if you use that, you actually can accidentally expose yourself to unintended access. The other one, access control allow credentials. This one, when set, allows cookies to be sent on the request. But it can only be used if you've specified a specific origin or if you're using null. If it isn't present, cookies aren't sent. But if you have something stored in a cookie that you need to send back to that site, then this would be specifying that specific origin and then turning on allow credentials true would send those cookies along. And it seems a little confusing because it's called credentials, but it actually is just whether or not cookies are sent with the request to that third-party site. And the third one is allow or access. I'm going to keep saying allow methods. Access control allow methods. This just specifies what you can do. So an HTTP request, especially when you're talking about REST services, there are different types of methods that you can execute. So a GET method would ask for information and that information to be sent back. So like maybe you're fetching some JSON data through a GET, you'll get information back. Post would be creating like a new record. So you send some JSON with a post request and to add something to a web service. Put and patch do something similar. There's a whole thing about post, put, and patch, like when to use what, creating a new record, updating a record, or updating part of a record. But they essentially more or less do the same thing. Delete removes a resource. And then options simply asks, what options do I have? And in terms of specifying this, you can either, using a comma delimited list, specify which methods are allowed, or you can just simply allow all methods. If you don't implement all methods, allowing all methods, it doesn't necessarily cause any problems. So I mentioned credentials. I said cookies. I wanted to put this slide in somewhere, but I couldn't really find a good spot. SameSite cookies. We've talked about this a lot. It's something that comes up often when people are building and deploying their mobile applications. You build your app in Alpha Anywhere. You upload it up to Ionic AppFlow. You build it. You install it on your device, and then when you go to log in, it doesn't work. And it was because the SameSite cookie policy was not changed on the application site, on the application server, from whatever the system default is to unset. The SameSite cookie setting controls whether or not a cookie is going to be sent with your request to a third-party site. If it's set to strict, cookies aren't sent. And if you've got a service that is using credentials to include the cookies as part of it, and those are needed, those cookies won't go up. So with respect to the application server, we do use cookies, and we would like you to send them on your requests with your mobile applications so we can log you in. So, and that's in relation to sessions. We used to have something called cookieless sessions, where somebody could access your site, and we didn't track it with cookies, but we got rid of that because it just was not good practice. So that session that corresponds to that user is tracked with that cookie. And that needs to be sent with the request, which is why you need to make sure that your SameSite cookie policy is unset. And if that isn't set, it may manifest as a CORS error if you're debugging your app using like Android Studio. So I went through that really, really fast, and I just want to touch base real quick. With CORS, it's just a specification of what websites are allowed to read data from your web application. Otherwise, the browser will just explicitly not allow it. And so I did want to talk about misconfigurations, things to look out for if you're building web services. These are things that you need to think about if you're going to implement CORS policies. And one thing that I learned, and this is all stuff that I've learned, I'm going to tell you guys what really good resource to go watch after this if you're still thoroughly confused. But the access control allow-origin only lets you specify a single origin. And if you don't want to put that, specify it as like public, anybody can access it, then you need to actually specify a specific URL. And you may be tempted to use code to dynamically generate that, which is fine. There are ways to do it that don't expose you to risk. But something that a lot of people think about doing or have tried that turns out to be not a great idea is they'll use like a regular expression, and they'll do something like any domain that starts with www.mydomain will be allowed access, or ends with mydomain.com will be allowed access. The thing about both of these is that an attacker could take that first portion, www.mydomain, and then append to the end .mymaliciousite.com. And that will match. And now you've given access to someone whom you didn't intend to give access. Maybe you've used a bunch of subdomains. So www.mydomain, or, you know, ones we have on our website, alphasoftware.com. So we have our main site, www.alphasoftware.com, but we also have blog.alphasoftware.com, forum.alphasoftware.com, learn.alphasoftware.com. Those are all different domains, and under the same origin policy, access is not allowed between them. So if we want to do something like, all right, if it ends in alphasoftware.com, allow it. Except again, somebody else could go and purchase a domain that's with something like www.mymaliciousite.alphasoftware.com. So that could still pass that regex. So just be wary of that if you need to do something like this where you want to dynamically specify the origin so you're not granting all access. Be cognizant of the dangers you can run into with pattern matching or having some sort of simple rule of ending with or starting with. You just be aware of that. Next one I want to mention was origin null. And origin null was intended for working with sandbox stuff. The unfortunate effect of this is that if somebody puts their malicious code to make the call within just an iframe with the sandbox property on their site, it's going to allow it because that's a null origin. It reads as a null origin. So avoid it, don't use it. It's easily spoofed. People run into pitfalls all the time with this one. Just be careful. And then the third one, which was an example in the video that I'm going to give you guys, recommend you guys go watch if you want to learn even more about this. There's something called Intellig-ade, and this is like a really like infamous situation that happened. But Intellig-ade was a server that ran on an internal network, and by default, it configured the access control allow origin to start, to allow everyone on that internal network access, which is fine, except that the people on this internal network could also access the internet. And what was discovered was that someone could put malicious code on a site, on a web page, and if that person visited that web page, it could then execute code to request the credentials to log into Intellig-ade or just run remote code, because once that code got on that person's server or on that local machine, it was then viewed as coming from the internal network, which was totally allowed to access this thing. So the thing that's in bold is an article to go check out if you'd like to learn more about this. I don't think I'm giving this its due justice in an explanation, but basically, if you're going to have an internal network and you're going to do this same origin, you're going to implement a CORS policy so that people can access things. Make sure you're not using star if they're also able to access the internet, because you're going to open yourself up to exposure. And so here are a few best practices. And that first one, proper configuration. Just make sure you've set up your CORS headers the way you need them to be. If you have, for example, if you have methods that can be performed by your site internally, like a post, but you don't want to expose that to everyone, take post out of the allowed methods. If you want to, restrict access to trusted sites, use a whitelist. Just keep a database of a list of URLs that can access it to avoid some of the pitfalls of trying to dynamically program your way out of it. Because you try as you might, we're all human at the end of the day, and everyone forgets an edge case. They're so easy to forget. And then also avoid using null, and do not use star on internal networks. Intellig-ade's example is a very good one to look at there. And then this is the resource. I really recommend you guys go watch this video to learn more about CORS. I'm borrowing heavily from a lot of the information presented today from that presentation. It's a very good presentation. Rana Khalil did a very good job explaining it, and it's very, very easy to digest. And she talks about more than what was covered here, some of the security, some other security incidences that happened, as well as how to test your site for CORS issues. She touches on that briefly. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're developing web services, it's worth checking out. And then the live demo today is, where do you go configure this? So we've done a few demos on web services, how to create your own web service in Alpha Anywhere using our REST reference builder. And there is a place in there for you to set up your CORS policy if you don't want to use our system default. So if you remember this, some of you might not. If you remember, we did a demo a while back where we created this web service. Let's go look at this one. To expose the customers table, order details, and orders in a database. We used the Northwinds database that came with Alpha Anywhere. But we exposed a few endpoints that will let you do a post. And we talked a little bit about, authentication. How do you add authentication on that to make sure somebody who is sending the request is allowed to access it? But we did not talk about CORS. And so if you're in this REST API builder, which you can get to from the web services new, if you define a new definition to create a REST service, that's going to give you that builder. And there are a bunch of different ways you can create this service. You can generate it from using a Genie to expose the services. You can import one from Google. We have a whole bunch of the Google services listed in there. You can just pick like YouTube or I think Drive might be one of them that you can add in to, create these methods for, calling into that service with XBasic. It's not necessarily to expose a service, but I think I'm confusing things. Anyway, if you build it, build this, you can build it from scratch. It's all based off of XBasic and everything can be configurable. And the one that I want to take a look at is this checkbox over here. It says allow cross-domain requests. That's on by default because presumably if you're exposing these services, then you want people to be able to access them from outside your website. But the default configuration may not be what you want, especially if you want to whitelist things and lock it down. So by default, if you open up this, if you click this explain button, it opens up this little box that talks about cross-domain requests. But in this setup, Alpha Anywhere will allow post, get, put, and delete methods, and the allowed origins is all of them, star. If you would prefer that to be something from a whitelist, then you would need to configure this separately. I'll click copy example here, just so I can copy the example out of here. But the way that's done is in the request handler. So this whole thing has one already built in, this options request handle. I'm just going to add it here. But if we go look at that XBasic class, where that's defined, we'll save this for now. And if you didn't have an options defined yet, then you would have to add one to your class. But if we click on XBasic here and go look at this customer's demo that we had generated, and we look for options, there options request handler. So this is the thing that gets called, or gets to generate the response sent to the browser when another site makes a request to your site. So this thing generates the headers that are added. If you don't specify the allow control the access control allow origin, access control allow methods, those are added those are added automatically. So if you wanted to change this, you would come in here and you would add a header for each one of those. So we could do access control allow origin, and maybe we only want example.com. Now remember, the origin is the protocol, the domain, and the port. So you'll want to make sure those are all specified here. And maybe the only thing we allow control allow the methods. Hold up. I wrote it down. Methods with an S. Get. Maybe only gets allowed, so you can't do these other post things that it certainly can be done with this this XBasic class that implemented the access to the Northwinds database, but maybe we don't want allow people to post or put anything or delete records. So then we just only allow get, and that restricts access to those other things. So this is called pre-flight options request. And you may see the word CORS pre-flight failed in the console, or maybe you've never seen it before, but if you see it, all it means is that the server contacted, not the server, a request was made from a site to your site, and it didn't allow the method that was sent. So maybe it sent a post and you only allow get, so that would fail. The pre-flight options would fail. The request may also fail if the origins don't match. So if I am not example.com, if I'm stuffandthings.org and I make the request, I will get a failure back because the origin didn't match the one that was allowed, which is this example.com one. So here is where you would specify it in your web service if you want to have more control over that. This function doesn't have to be statically defined. If you have a whitelist in a database somewhere, you could do that lookup here. You know, if it exists, then you would add the origin. If it doesn't exist, then you would add something else. You definitely want to add an origin, because if you don't specify it, it's going to default to asterisk, which means everyone. So keep that in mind. So, and that's just to allow a site to call you. It's not, you're not exposing yourselves to a security problem to letting people be able to call your web services when you define them. The other places you might run into issues if you don't have authentication on sensitive data, then you've exposed it. You know, those are separate considerations during implementation. So this is it's a really short demo. CORS is applicable in other areas, like when you're configuring Amazon S3 buckets or other sites where you've hosted files. And if people have questions about that, I can certainly attempt to answer them. But I just wanted to, talk about this today so that when you see that error message, let's go back and look at it. When you see this, especially in the context of building a web service, then you have a little bit more information to go off of and kind of know a little bit more about what's going on.
All right, so quick question. Pre-flight, what does that mean in context to an HTML request or an AJAX request?
It's made by the browser. The browser makes an options request to the site.
I see.
And if that request fails, then you get a pre-flight failure.
Okay, very good.
Here's, pre-flight request doesn't allow access. So no access control allow origin here. This failed because the origin isn't allowed. So it's just a word, the way I understand it. Like the request goes to the server and it comes back, and then the browser either gives you some sort of weird error like this that talks about pre-flight, or you get the data.
Or okay, I understand.
Yeah. So it's either going to fail or you'll get what you want. And just as a heads up, debugging CORS problems is not easy. My spouse works in for a cybersecurity company and does a lot of web front end stuff. And they, debugging this stuff for them, it's a pain in the butt. So if you do need, assistance with this, there are tools out there available in Chrome you can add to help you kind of investigate why, if you thought you configured the origin right, but it's coming back wrong, what happened? What are you actually getting back? And it actually lets you inspect, the information that was sent by the browser to the web service, as well as the response you got back from that service.
Excellent. Now, another question is, would it be safe to use an IP site address instead of a domain name?
I don't see why not.
Yeah, I don't
I
either.
mean, ideally a static IP address.
Yes, agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
No,
Right.
the IP address should be fine.
Yep. Okay.
I don't
Great.
think you expose yourself to security problems with that.
It's not the same, right? Yep.
No.
All right.
And I think you can look up IP addresses for websites in the domain registry.
Like a reverse. Oh yeah, yeah. DNS
Yeah,
lookup.
I think
based
that
on
stuff's
IP.
all public records. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Very good. Next question. So it looks like we're out of CORS questions.
Okay,
The
good.
next question
Everyone
I've got.
understood it perfectly.
Everyone understood it absolutely perfectly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So wait, here's another CORS problem, or possibly a CORS problem. The question is, I'm having a problem with downloading from my S3 bucket. Could the CORS policy be causing the problem?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
You do have to configure a CORS policy to allow access to the content.
Correct.
And
So
if
that
get isn't one of those allowed methods, then that would prevent the download. So I would go check that out. Amazon also has, on your buckets, there are other settings for access. And with respect to Alpha Anywhere, those file downloads happen through an API call, which does require like your Amazon S3 credentials to access it. So you're not simply just exposing your data if you're worried about going in there and changing an allowed origin to star.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. Okay, good answer. If the person who asked that is still running into issues, of course, send an email to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. We could take a look a bit further. Let's see what else I've got here. That's it for CORS. I have a question now on reporting and the layout table report. This person has created a report using the quick report genie, and they selected a style in that quick report genie, but they didn't do it as a layout table report. They must have done it as a classic report, because they then converted the report to a layout table. Now what they want to do is sort of change the general style of the report from the color that they originally chose. How do you go about changing styles in a layout table report? Oh, I'm asking you a hard question today. You don't know the answer? Well, the answer is you send an email to
That's
guides at
an
Alpha
area of the
Software.
product I'm quite weak on, but let's just
On the
make a
report
new
builder. Let's take a
report.
look. I've done the
Yeah,
report.
so
quite a
let's
few
make a
times.
new report. So reports, reports are a way to generate, PDFs, or you can even make Word documents. You can use them to export stuff to Excel.
Mhm.
Pretty cool. And Alpha Anywhere has a very good report builder. And a layout table, correct?
So they did it, but let's start with quick report.
You can use a
And
quick
then-
report, yeah. And we'll use a SQL data source. There are two other options. We're not going to
Mhm.
dig too deep into this. And I'm going to use the Northwind database because it's there and already set up.
Yep.
And we will not use the Alpha Anywhere system table.
We will use
Let
the
us
customers
pick
table. There we go.
products.
Okay, that's good.
I like going with products because and we'll
That's
pick
tough,
all
isn't
the columns.
I
I
wouldn't
don't
do
remember what E stands for, but that's just a code for the field type. I think it's exponential, meaning a number.
I'm not sure they're all going to fit. Might want to think about choosing 3.
All right, we'll pick 3.
All right.
We'll pick product name, unit price,
That's good.
and units in stock. We'll go finish. Again, this is not that's something I work with often. So the fields you want to include the report, let's just put them all in there. We don't need to group anything. There's some settings here with the report title.
And there's
Filter
one
order,
called
calculate
style.
field style. So maybe I'm guessing they came in here and picked something like a classic style.
Mhm.
or some of the borders.
Mhm.
Make it olive. So that, that adds some nice coloration.
Now, this isn't a preview of your actual report. This is a preview of what the colors are going to look like when
Yes,
your
this
report
isn't
is
my report
generated.
at all. No, I
Right.
don't have an invoice number in my data.
Yep.
But if you click on preview, it does show you what you're going to get.
And there are your colors.
And
Cool.
there's my colors.
So now let's save that out and convert this to a layout table report.
All right, let's do that. So we'll call this one products. Save it.
Uh-huh.
Close it. And convert this. I think I can just do it from here.
I think it's in the context menu, yeah, somewhere.
Let me know if you see
Convert,
it.
convert. I have not converted one of these reports in a little while, to be honest with you.
Oh, I did this a few months ago, but I think you have to do it from in here. Save as. Nope. Open a report editor. There we go. Let's open a report editor as a layout table report. A copy of this report.
Okay.
Products, LT, layout table, save. And then we'll see what happens. So here we go. So they want to change the style.
They want to change the color, the style, the color in particular, but so in a
right.
layout
So
table
I
report, it's done in cells. Yeah.
believe, let's see here. So I'm just going to look here real quick. Color isn't specified, which indicates to me that this is actually being pulled from somewhere else. So I'm going to guess if I click on style sheets, it's going to open up the report style sheet. So then I can pick a different one. Now it's tan. But if I want to make a new one, I can click new. My style. Let's make the color
Ooh, lime green.
ooh,
All right. No, you don't have to do that. That's pretty awful.
okay. Somewhere in this blue
How
here.
about teal? That's pretty bad. I like
Yeah,
that.
border style, solid radius, banded, sure. Click OK.
There you go.
That's our new style sheet. I can now click edit, and I can edit these things.
So again,
Just
you
out
found
of
these.
curiosity.
Yeah.
If I open up the web projects folder, I'm just wondering if that information gets saved in here somewhere,
Or is it just saved in the report?
or if it's just saved in the report. It looks like it might just be saved in the report. So that's where you would edit it if you want to change those colors. Obviously, you can come in here and override all these things using the font and border options here with the properties for a selected item. And I think you even have, I think you might have properties in here. Backdrop, region.
Yep, those
Nope.
look good, and it looks like it answered the question as well, which is
All right,
terrific.
yeah, but yeah, it's up here in that style sheets drop down. So
Yep. Well,
I think there's more options beyond this, and I might be wrong, but there may be a way to access that underlying style sheet itself and add in your own markup, but that's where
edit,
you would
save
do
it,
it here.
use it in a different report, that kind of thing, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. So and then if you don't want radius, you can make this 0 and make it a box again. So that's where you go edit it.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, it looks like we have run out of questions. I think you've
What?
answered them all. I know, it's crazy. Listen, everyone. Hey, thanks very much for presenting today. What's our topic next week again? Can you just do a quick review of that?
Oh yeah, Deion's going to talk about UX watch events, and I'm just going to do some spoilers here. Let's go look at those. Let's make a new web component. We added this new feature in the last release of Alpha Anywhere. It's on the Properties tab. Watch events.
So this is
Called
what
watch
Dina's going to be
events.
covering
So
next week.
in the past, if you wanted to do something like capture when somebody hit the enter key, no matter where they were in your app, you'd have to manually add that using JavaScript with the $e method and capture the clicker on key press something event for that key control. This is just the UI on top of that.
Oh, nice. Excellent.
You know, it also lets you do things like watch a bunch of different controls when they change and stuff like that. So maybe you want something to get triggered, like a pop-up warning, or you know, expose some settings or something that couldn't be dynamically computed
Excellent.
using the like show hide settings.
Yep. Out of curiosity, is this a nightly release? Sorry, nightly release feature, or is it a production feature?
No,
for
it's
watch
been
events?
released.
It's been released. Excellent. So it's
Yeah,
probably the
like
last one.
80.99. 80.99 was the last release.
Okay, that's where
So
to
yeah,
find
that
it.
was at it. Keyboard shortcuts is the one I was thinking about. That we already had that. That's the one that captures enter keys. Watch events is watching a bunch of disparate controls that you normally couldn't watch.
Okay, that makes
See,
sense.
this is why you should come to the webinar next week, because Dion's going to know everything about it.
Dion will explain it properly, but
Yeah.
now we kind of know
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Sarah, thank you again. And thanks everyone for showing up today. Look forward to seeing you at our next Alpha demo and Q&A webcast. Until then, take care, stay well. Bye-bye.